Moral turpitude that he did not file for 4 years. He did not file his income tax return, did not pay taxes. It's repeated. Maybe if it's only once and because he had to flee the country, that can be excused. But he did this 4 times. We already agreed that we will release our resolution on January 17. This is no longer excusable that it's been, 17 days? What's the big mystery there? This case is so easy. There are so many admissions there in the transcript. So easy to decide this case. What's so hard about this case? So there is political influence. They're delaying it so that my vote will not be counted because I'm retiring.
You heard our interview with COMELEC Commissioner Guanzon, where the commissioner says someone is influencing the disqualification case against Bongbong Marcos, as their resolution should have been released last January 17 by Commissioner Amy Ferolino.
Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, the party of Bongbong Marcos, on the other hand, is calling on COMELEC to investigate Guanzon for disclosing her vote while the case is still pending. PFP General Counsel George Briones went so far as to suggest that Guanzon be disbarred with forfeiture of her retirement benefits and lifetime pension. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Hall.
I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. While COMELEC Commissioner Guanzon may have disclosed her vote to the public, will it still count if the resolution is filed after she retires?
How have previous court decisions ruled in these matters, and can a vote be withdrawn? Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the story.
COMELEC Commissioner Guanzon's vote to disqualify presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos would be cancelled by Wednesday next week. That's if the COMELEC First Division fails to decide on the Marcos case before Guanzon goes into retirement on February 2. This much is clear from a Supreme Court decision on a similar case in 2001.
It is as if she did not sign. So ang bibilangin lang yung mga nakapirma.
Kung siya po ay nagretiro at hindi pa ho ipinalabas itong desisyon na ito, mag-aantay ng panibagong commissioner para mabuo na naman yung tatlo.
In its 2001 decision in Dumayas versus COMELEC, the Supreme Court ruled that the vote of a commissioner is considered automatically withdrawn if the commissioner retires or leave office before the promulgation.
The principle is that if it's not yet promulgated, it's not binding, and if at the time the decision is promulgated, the justice who signed it, or the commissioner in this case who signed it, has already retired or resigned or died, the signature is already considered withdrawn.
Guanzon says an unidentified politician has been pressuring the commission to delay the promulgation in order to nullify her vote. But as controversial as the statements of Guanzon may be, election lawyer Buko de la Cruz said a delayed decision and a withdrawn vote is not unusual.
Marami ng ganyang kaso, kaya nga meron tayong Dumayas, meron tayong Hamil versus COMELEC. Marami nang nauna na hindi naman si Guanzon lang ang nauna na nagre-retire. Pero dito lang, siya lang yung maingay na gusto niyang ilabas yung decision na napirmahan na niya.
The credibility of the COMELEC, the credibility of the May 2022 elections, it is at stake.
Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Joining us tonight, Attorney George Briones, the General Counsel of Partido Federal ng Pilipinas. Good evening, Attorney Briones. Welcome po to The Big Story.
Hi, good evening, Robbie. And good evening to all of your listeners.
Attorney, isa-isahin po natin. First of all, is there precedent, and what is the precedent when a commissioner of the Commission on Elections retires? What happens to their decisions and their votes?
Well, I do not want to speculate. My frank answer to your question is I don't know. So, I do not deal with that. with regards to the PFP. Our only issue for today is that it is wrong to announce your vote in a decision that has not been promulgated.
Okay.
As to what happens when she retires, I do not know. That is my answer to your question.
Okay, so it is the announcement, it is going public with her decision that you are objecting to. But on the matter of her saying, as far as I'm concerned, I've filed my decision, nandyan na yan, on record na yan, does that hold water?
No, there is no decision yet. Because if there is a decision, it will be signed by 3 commissioners. And it will be promulgated by the clerk of court of the First Division. As of now, as we speak, there is no decision yet.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, you have expressed your concerns about the actions of Commissioner Guanzon, but let's go to her complaint and her allegations that there is political pressure being brought to bear upon the COMELEC division to delay. You are a party in this case on that matter of political pressure, trying to delay the release of a decision by the division. Are you not concerned about that allegation as well?
First, we are not a party in these cases. The party here is respondent Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. Second, as to her complaints or allegations, meaning what Commissioner Rowena Guanzon is saying all over the media, Commissioner Aimee Ferolino has just issued a statement answering her. And what Commissioner Aimee Ferolino said is that there is no undue delay. In fact, what she said is there is undue haste. So there is now a conflict within these two set of facts.
Okay. Attorney George Briones, maraming salamat po. Attorney Briones is counsel for the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas. And these are the other big stories tonight. No more country risk classification. Fully vaxxed travelers only need a negative RT-PCR test and proof of vaccination to enter the Philippines.
What's next for ABS-CBN? Experts weigh in on the options the network giant could take now that their frequency has been given to Villar's group. And my exclusive interview with WBC featherweight champ Mark Magnifico Magsayo. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Without its original frequencies, what will the future look like for ABS-CBN if it does manage to bag a franchise under the next administration?
A former DICT chief says the landscape may change with a shift from analog to digital TV set next year, while Deputy Commissioner of the NTC says transmitter sharing is also an option. Mon Gualvez with the story.
Former DICT Secretary Eliseo Rio tells One News the chiefs that ABS-CBN can still apply for a digital frequency in 2023, but it must first be given a franchise. But Rio says the shift from analog to digital would have started by then. And because of this, ABS-CBN may have to wait in line longer to get new frequencies.
2023 pa ma-approve, no? So that I think explains the reason bakit may lag, no? It's not I think the long line, but actually because we will only have digital TV on 2023.
But it's not just analog TV that will be phased out. Rio says congressional franchises may no longer be needed in the future.
Right now, technology is showing us that, a private person can really broadcast, have as many subscribers as ABS-CBN, as long as he has the content that people are interested in.
National Telecommunications Commission Deputy Commissioner Edgardo Cabarrios presents another option. On One News Business World Live, Cabarrios said ABS-CBN can also apply to share transmitters with other networks.
When you transition digital, you have 38 channels, and each of these channels can accommodate 6 programs. So that means if each company has one program, there are more than 200 companies that can be accommodated. They can talk to 3 or 4 companies with authorizations and build a single a common transmitter and share the cost.
Cabarrios also says there is no reason to challenge the NTC's decision to award ABS-CBN's frequencies in court because what the commission has done is legal.
Well, everything is above board. First is the vacated frequencies, because the franchise of ABS-CBN expired and no renewal. And the authorizations were cancelled, and the Spectrum TV channels and radio AM and FM channels were recalled. And more than 1 year already. So this remain unutilized. These are limited public resource.
For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
The Philippines is again at the bottom of Bloomberg's COVID-19 resiliency rankings for January. The Philippines ranks 53rd out of 53 countries in the resilience index with a score of 48.3. The score is a slight improvement from December when the Philippines had a score of 43.1. The report said developing countries like the Philippines were still struggling to administer COVID-19 vaccines due to logistical issues. But Malacanang says Bloomberg should have looked for a different indicator of resiliency. At the bottom of the list, along with the Philippines, Vietnam, and Russia, Bloomberg ranking considers a country a success in its full vaccination, openness to travel, and outbreak size.
Siguro ang pinakamagandang indicator ng resilience ay yung ating economic growth. Fourth quarter ng 2021, 7.7% po economic growth. Full year 2021, 5.6% economic growth.
Meanwhile, fully vaccinated travelers will no longer be required to undergo facility-based quarantine upon arrival as government has suspended its country risk classification starting February 1. Fully vaxxed travelers will only be required to present a negative RT-PCR test taken 48 hours prior to departure, but inbound travelers are being asked to monitor themselves for 7 days for COVID symptoms. Cabinet Secretary and Acting Presidential Spokesperson Carlo Nograles says international travelers should have the following proof of vaccination: WHO International Certificates of Vaccination and Prophylaxis, vaxxed, and a national or state digital certificate of the government which has accepted vaxxed under a reciprocal arrangement. Meanwhile, unvaccinated and partially vaccinated travelers are still required to undergo facility-based isolation until they get a negative test result taken on the 5th day. And then they have to complete the 14-day quarantine at home.
For the big story in sports, from being the underdog to now a world champion, Mark Magnifico Magsayo punched his way to the elite club after defeating Gary Russell Jr. last Sunday. And we caught up with a new champ to find out what's next. More in this report.
Thought that was the right up. It's done better. Left-handed. And the new WBC featherweight champion of the world, Mark Magnifico Magsayo.
It's mission accomplished for Mark Magnifico Magsayo. This was after he claimed the WBC World Featherweight Championship by outclassing American Gary Russell Jr. via majority decision. With the victory, Magsayo remains undefeated and now holds a 24-0 record.
Lagi kong tinatanong sa sarili ko kung kailan pa ako makalaban ng world title fight. Kasi ngayon biglang nag-world champion na ako, kaya yung mga pinaghirapan naman talaga nag-paid off.
But behind Magnifico's exciting win was a lot of hard work and sacrifice. The 24-year-old boxer was supported by a world-class team composed of his nutritionist, Janeth Aro, who also helped Olympic gold medalist Heidelin Diaz, and coach Freddie Roach, the man behind Pinoy boxing legend Manny Pacquiao.
Grabe yung sakripisyo ko kahit December 25 dito, training pa rin ako. Ginawa ko na lahat para manalo. Sobrang importante na may isang coach Freddie Roach sa likod ng aking career.
So what's next for Mark? While his team has yet to reveal his next opponent, Mark says he's very open to doing a rematch with Gary Russell Jr.
Kung magaling na kung magaling na yung shoulder niya, why not? Pero dadaan siya sa mga pagsubok na dinaanan ko, babalik siya sa umpisa bago siya makalaban sa akin. Kasi pinaghirapan ko rin to eh.
Magsayo meanwhile said that he is very thankful to all his supporters, especially those residing in New Jersey. But of course, Mark says he couldn't have done it without his wife.
Sobrang laki ng tulong ng misis ko kasi siya lahat gumagawa ng kontrata ko sa paano kontrata sa laban dito. Tsaka siya po yung manager ko ngayon, kaya sobrang thankful ako kasi lahat ng mga needs ko binibigay niya.
For now, Mark and his team will enjoy their much-deserved rest as they plan to go back to the country in the coming days. Gretchen Ho, We Are One News. Time for another quick break. When we return, Isko Moreno was also placed on the hot seat in Boy Abunda's presidential interview, where he was also asked why voters should not vote the other presidential aspirants. After removing pole vaulter EJ Obiena from its roster, PATAFA says it will no longer support the athlete. And a Chinese New Year, but without the crowded celebration? How are people looking to spend this festivity? Find out after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Chinese New Year in Binondo this year wasn't as vibrant in the absence of physical activities due to COVID-19.
But quite surprisingly, people still queued up for the traditional tikoy. Gerard de la Peña has the story.
Dragon dance, street parades, and parties. This is all part of the quintessential Chinese Lunar New Year festivities in Manila. But welcoming the year of the Blackwater Tiger won't be as eventful as in the past, as Mayor Isko Moreno bans gatherings due to the rising number of COVID-19 cases. To compensate for the cancelled events, this shopping mall in Binondo hung their many red lanterns and put out various installations.
Pero yung feeling ng we're celebrating Chinese New Year, we're trying to get that emotion pa rin para nakita nila na tuloy pa rin naman tayong celebration.
Not a lot of takers in the Lucky Charms and Fruit department, but customers are still forming a beeline to buy tikoy, a sticky cake made of glutinous rice flour which can be bought for 50 up to around 300 pesos per box, depending on the size, flavor, and brand.
Di ba malagkit yan? Parang ang pamilya, ganun na kinakailangan din silang laging magkakasama.
Those who seek good luck for the new year are told to put up a prosperity basket which is sold for 1,500 pesos per set. For those who are fond of wearing crystals, remember to choose the right one, as this would depend on one's birth year, livelihood or profession, and personal needs.
Kasi may basis tayo, based sa iyong animal sign. So, may computation yon, gano'n. Hindi siya huhulaan. Tapos, yun. So, kung nagtugma doon sa ginagawa mo ngayon, then, doon natin masasabi kung ano yung kailangan mo.
Beyond the festivities and the lucky charms, what is important is we have a positive attitude and a negative COVID test. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has revealed why he believes Filipinos should not vote for two of his rivals, namely Vice President Leni Robredo and former Senator Bongbong Marcos. In a presidential interview with Boy Abunda, Moreno did not cite reasons why Filipinos should not vote for Pacquiao and Lacson, saying they also can become president. But for Robredo, Moreno says she should not be voted as she only wants to seek vengeance against the Marcoses and the Dutertes. In the same breath, Moreno says Filipinos should also not vote for Marcos Jr. as he believes the former senator is only seeking vengeance against the supporters of the Aquinos and Robredos.
Bakit ikaw ang dapat iboto? Hindi ako magiganti kanino man. Wala akong pagigantihan. Ako, sa dami ng problema, sa bilis ng problema, kailangan natin ng mga tunay na solusyon at mabilis na aksyon. That I can do in my own little way.
Another big story in sports, the Philippine Athletics Track and Field Association has announced that they will no longer treat EJ Obiena as their athlete. In a statement, PATAFA said that they will move on from the row it has with Obiena and his team. This was after the federation concluded their internal investigation. And with this, PATAFA will no longer support their star pole vaulter, claiming that Obiena has already found people who will finance his trainings abroad and cost of living. The world number 5, meanwhile, announced that he is pushing back his season debut as he continues to recover from his knee injury. This means that Obiena will not see action in the INIT indoor meeting happening today. Obiena, though, is expected to compete in the ISTAF indoor in Berlin come February 4. Over in the NBA, the league has announced the starters for the 2022 All-Star Game on February 20. LeBron James and Kevin Durant again will be the captains of the two teams in this year's All-Star Game. Joining James in the Western Conference are Golden State Warriors guard Stephen Curry, Memphis Grizzlies guard Ja Morant, reigning NBA MVP Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets, and Warriors forward Andrew Wiggins. Meanwhile, in the East, Durant is joined by Chicago Bulls guard DeMar DeRozan and Atlanta Hawks guard Trae Young in the backcourt, while Philadelphia 76ers center Joel Embiid and Milwaukee Bucks forward Giannis Antetokounmpo round up the front court.
After the global hit Squid Games in 2021, South Korea is at it again. With a new zombie thriller called All of Us Are Dead, now streaming on Netflix. Before its premiere, the trailer has already over 12 million views. But what sets it apart from other zombie series? Saga director Lee Jae-kyu had this to say.
원작이 한국에서는
Most of the zombies have only hunger that drives them, but our zombies have terror that drives them.
While the series is an adaptation from a webtoon, Q said that they made some aspects different.
저는 일단 식량 확보를 하고 the character and the decisions that they make can be a little bit different from the original webtoon. And I think what's most important is that decisions made by teens who are, immature, they can provide us adults with some food for thought.
One of the cast, Park Ji-hoo, also added that it has some allegorical touch to what's happening now.
Because we are experiencing this pandemic right now, I thought that was why All of Us Are Dead became more realistic to me, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people.
For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Pen pals might not be a thing nowadays, but back then, that's how people got to know one another Now, what would you do if you suddenly received a letter from your old pen pal?
In December, a letter written to a 12-year-old girl in Lithuania was delivered almost 51 years after it was sent by a pen pal in Poland. In the letter stamped March 1970, a girl named Iwa complained that buses no longer reach her village, forcing her to walk outside in the cold temperatures. And now in her 60s, Genowefa Klonovska said she no longer remembers Iwa, guessing that their relationship dwindled after she didn't receive the reply to her own letter.
The letter and 17 others fell out of a ventilation hole last summer as a wall was demolished in a former post office in the outskirts of Vilnius. Postal workers spent months looking for houses as street names and numbering have since changed. Only 5 recipients were found. In several cases, children of deceased recipients were handed the lost letters. Nonetheless, an emotional moment for many.
Mostly the people who received the letters nowadays, they were on one hand they were emotional because it's like, you know, a letter from 50 years ago, like a small historical moment, some small piece or small document of those days, how they lived, how they felt, what was important for them 50 years ago.
Iba pa rin talaga yung sulat kamay, ano?
At saka, aminin ko, naaalala ko pa mga pen pal.
Ang ganun ba?
Oo, nung grade school, maraming mga klase required kayo. Sulat ka ng ano, tapos ipapadala ng eskwelahan sa ibang bansa. Tapos may kapalit
Gumagana
pen
ba?
pal. Gumagana! Oo.
Pero anong gamit mo? Ballpen o typewriter?
Ballpen lang, handwritten.
Ballpen.
Yung typewriter na nakita mo sa Facebook, kung hindi yung ginagamit yun, baka masira pa.
Pang-display lang.
Pang-display lang yun.
Pero iba pa rin talaga. Pero make sure lang na makakarating on time, di ba? Well, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.